of closing your business. Government has tried to do its best to come to the party, and this is exactly what we'll be doing this evening, just speaking through the various relief measures that it had announced and introduced to South Africa in the past 2 months to help business and to help South Africans as much as it can. But of course, many of you will testify that this has not been without its challenges, as really all of us are traversing uncharted waters at this moment. We'll be hearing from government, the DTI to be specific, and we'll be hearing more around the relief measures and how it has tried its best to put the marginalized, mainly women, in the business sector quite first, or rather how it's tried to treat women equally to other business people in the sector in some of the relief measures that it has announced so far. I do look forward to hearing from all of you and your experiences so far in engaging some of the relief measures from government and even the private sector, which we have also seen coming to the party by way of announcing quite a number of payment holidays or interest holidays on loans, and also facilitating the access of credit. This evening, we'll also hear from businesswomen like yourselves who will share their stories and share their testimonies of how COVID-19 has been treating their businesses and exactly what they are doing to try and survive and really suffer any form of economic blow from this devastating pandemic. You can share your thoughts of some of the thoughts that are shared by various speakers this evening with the hashtag, or using the hashtag Businesswomen Persevere, and specifically for the ladies who were not able to join us this evening. Before we do get the show officially on the road, I'd like to walk through a few housekeeping rules to everyone. Can we just bear with me a moment, as I do have the housekeeping rules on your screen, but can we all make sure that we do turn off our videos throughout the presentation? We want to make sure that the webinar is devoid of as many glitches as possible and also hacks. And another thing, can you please keep your microphones on mute unless it is your turn to speak? And finally, this is really about engagement, and we do look forward to hearing from you. So please make use of the chat box throughout the session. We will see those chats coming through, and also you can raise your questions. We will get to them, and you will be able to have a lot of them answered. For those questions that aren't answered, and for any other queries that you may have around tonight, you are more than welcome to contact BWA, and you can reach out to them at gauteng@bwasa.co.za. The email address is there on screen, so hopefully all you ladies have jotted it down. Right, on that note, I'd like to get tonight's agenda moving. We do have great speakers here with us this evening, but first we would like to hear from government, specifically Ms. Lerato Mataboge, who is the CEO of Trade Invest Africa, will now speak with us about the various relief measures that the DTI has introduced. Many of you know them quite well, but specifically how far these relief measures have gone to address and to also service women-owned businesses during this very difficult time of COVID-19. Lerato, the virtual stage is yours.
And no, evening. Hi, thank you so much, Fifi. And thank you so much to the Business Women's Association for the invitation, specifically Nola Mashabakala, who helped to essentially bring us all together, and for that I'm thankful. And of course, thank you, Fifi, for being the moderator today. And I've also requested and asked the acting CEO from the DTI of South African Bureau of Standards to join us this evening, Ms. Jody Scholz, who will also share some insight in so far as what the SABS is doing to contribute to competitiveness of our entities, our companies, especially women-owned companies, in the context of COVID-19. As a start, I think we are all mindful and aware that this indeed is an unprecedented pandemic, at least in our lifetime. So each and every government across the world is literally doing the best it can to respond in the most appropriate way possible for its own circumstances. So South Africa is no different. our leaders have really done their best, you know, and thankfully they've taken decisions based on data and science and the like, to come up with responses that bring us on a better course. The biggest challenge that we're facing now, as government, and I suppose business as well and civil society, is how do we maintain and ensure the balance between saving lives and protecting livelihoods? This is the question that we ask ourselves on a daily basis when we have to take decisions in response to this, to say, we have to save lives. At the same time, people have to live. People have to eat. The economy has to function. So that's the balancing act that we're going through at the moment. And I think we need to give credit where credit is due and say, as a country, South Africa has done very well insofar as, particularly insofar as the saving lives and flattening the curve aspect of things. I mean, just looking at the statistics, I was looking at the numbers today. The global infection rates now are standing at about 5.5 million people throughout the world that are infected. South African infection levels of that number is about 19,000. And we've got global deaths that are approaching 400,000. Deaths. South Africa is, fortunately, and we hope is not going to increase too much. We are at 369 deaths insofar as response to COVID. And mostly really it has been because of the response and the leadership that has been shown by society, by political decisions that have been taken. We have also tried to then put these mitigating factors and support measures that we are here to talk about today, to say, while balancing and flattening the curve, balancing and saving lives, how do we ensure that livelihoods still continue? So it's for that reason that a package of incentives was announced by the president and further packed by ministers, I think on the 21st of April. And the president made a commitment of about 10% of South Africa's GDP that's going to be put, the 500 billion, which constitute 10% of South Africa's GDP, that's going to be put forward to support different economic entities, if you will, particularly companies, to be able to survive as far as possible this challenge of COVID. Of that, just to summarize very, very quickly, about 200 billion of that was in the form of a loan guarantee scheme by major banks, National Treasury and the Reserve Bank. About 100 billion allocated for the unemployment insurance fund, insofar as workers and assistance to workers and wages and the loss of wages. About 70 billion in cash flow relief or direct payment to businesses has been set aside through 4-month holiday for companies and the like. 50 billion for grants that have been put aside. And so there's a whole breakdown of the amount, including 2 billion to assist SMMEs and spaza shops as well. There are other measures around tourism. There are other measures around the National Credit Act and Small Business Fund. Now, as a DTI specifically, so now I'll focus on what the DTI and its agencies are busy doing and to try and support the private sector in this at this time. We have prioritized food security. So we're working very closely, of course, with the Department of Agriculture. So from the DTI side, we have provided specific and dedicated support to the sugar industry. In April, we approved, the minister as well and gazetted and approved the Sugar Master Plan. So there has been some support to the sugar industry to make sure that at least from farm to the shop floor, this value chain and the value chain of sugar and the contribution of sugar to the broader food security chain is maintained. So that's one of the key things that we have done. Of course, when it comes to the National Credit Act as well, we've had a strategic role to play insofar as consumers' access to finance in this period. So issues of emergency loans as well have been dealt with, and guidelines around how that should work, and payment holidays and the like. Mm-hmm. We have also made sure that we support the maintenance of the health and the medical supply value chain. So it's been quite critical for the DTI to make sure that the different permits that have been issued, have to assist with the supply of health stocks, if you will, including the National Ventilator project that we are finalizing. as well as some of the approvals that the IDC has granted for funding, so that essential supplies, particularly around PPE equipment and medical supplies, are maintained. Specifically to IDC funding, there's quite a large amount of money that has been put aside to support different entities. To date, the IDC has approved around 476 million worth of funding for essential supplies, whether it's masks, sanitizers, medical gowns, and swabs and the like. And those approvals have resulted actually in an improvement and an increase in the supply of these different products. So again, part of the conversation should be, how do we bring more women into this? But we'll get to that. The other area that is very critical as well, of course, as I mentioned, food and consumer goods, pharmaceutical goods, protective equipment, personal protective equipment, importation of essential goods. There's one other area that we need to look at. And of course, the issue of exports. So as a department, so far, when it comes to large companies, we have assisted quite a number of companies with not only permits, import-export permits, we've assisted with a number of regulatory barriers that may pertain or exist in the economy. Some of the large companies have had issues with Eskom or electricity supply, so we as a DTIC have stepped in to assist in that regard. We've helped with unblocking some of the challenges at the ports, and the like, for your Adcock, Ingram, for your Tiger brands, you name the entire gamut. Now, I've also touched on issues of UIF. I think that we can give a summary separately for that. I want to specifically also look at NEF as one of the entities of the DTIC and some of the contribution they've made as well. They have launched a Black Business Fund. And to date, they have received around 300 applications. They've got about 1 billion that they're planning to disburse. So again, we need to have a conversation around what percentage of women-owned businesses will be able to benefit from such a fund and how that should work. But it's important that it's known that there is then a specific NEF fund as well in this regard. Similarly, the DTI has been supporting the issue of e-commerce and how we then use the whole e-commerce platform to continue to support and strengthen the issue of transformation and supply chains. So we have had engagements as well with different e-commerce platform holders to make sure that the majority of the content and the stock that is sold in these platforms, one, is made in South Africa, and then we maintain the diversity and the transformation of the whole supplier, the supplier database, if you will. And that's where now youth-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses become critical to say, how do we then begin to carve out space in this e-commerce platform as well? Because this will be, if not the major way of doing business going forward. COVID, I think, has taught us that, you know, the bricks and mortar phase, we may have to start having a rethink around that. We also have strategic role to play as a department of DTIC in the area of competition and the national consumer protection issues. So our tribunal has been looking into, and competition commission have been looking into issues of price gouging and the like, and really to protect the consumer around against predatory practices that may pertain to the COVID situation. So there are a few examples of what these entities have done from the DTI standpoint. Another critical institution that is part of the DTIC family that helps businesses, particularly women-owned businesses, I think we need to have further conversations around this, is the Bureau of Standards, SABS. So what they've done to date is they've collaborated with Business for South Africa, and they've been doing quite a lot of work to verify, one, products as well as documents and suppliers that are providing now as part of the response for COVID. So it's important that a number of our entrepreneurs are aware of this, because at least with these type of verifications, you then are able to gain access to procurement opportunities and the like. So SABS is doing quite a lot of work, and they've ramped up issues of compliance and the like there. They're also supporting local manufacturers with certification of different products, masks, hand sanitizer, and the like, in the quickest time possible because of the high level of demand. So it's important that that is known. I think I need to just hurry up and try to also indicate that the SABS are providing free access to some standards, because standards are at cost, right? So it's important that some businesses understand that there are free standards that you can have access to in response to COVID, particularly around medical equipment, protective clothing, and the like. Now, in conclusion, all these different measures that we have put forward, not just at the DTIC, but broadly as a government, there have been some criticism that have been shared with us. And I think we're quite grateful for that level of criticism, because all of us are responding to a really an unprecedented crisis. So there are 4 areas that have been highlighted, particularly, and we'd like to thank specifically TIPS for this, who raised, they've got a policy document, and they did an assessment of a number of our measures. One of the key things that they raised to us was that, government has responded positively in that the number of our support measures, particularly financial support measures, have been to support vulnerable households and vulnerable workers, which is good. It's securing livelihoods, and it's ensuring that we maintain the retail and the demand in the economy and the retail value chain. That's the one part. However, there's also a challenge that they've raised with us to say the majority of our financial support to entrepreneurs is to small businesses. So there's been some challenge of how do we help, where does big business go to for support, with the exception, of course, of IDC facilities, which are very finite. What then happens? There's a missing middle that we are not talking to or addressing. So that's one of the things that has been raised with us. But I must say to that, not to necessarily be defensive, because we have to be mindful that our pockets are finite as government and as private sector. In that we have provided some non-financial support to big business, whether it's regulatory issues, the permits are spoke to, issues at the ports, how do we assist with access to new markets and the like. So I think when we critique the money part, there also needs to be a recognition of the non-financial support and the contribution that makes to the sustainability of a business. Sure. And then the third area, I'll be wrapping up literally in 30 seconds. The third area, that they then also raise the issue of the number of the response measures and support measures are issued by individual departments, right? So sometimes there's a feeling that not all firms can fit in nicely or neatly into particular regulations that are issued by a particular department. The example was given, for example, of agricultural companies who may be too large to benefit from the agriculture department support measures, and then they end up having to compete with manufacturers that then have access to IDC, as an example. So somehow there seems to be some silo compartmentalization that the market has raised that we need to be mindful of as government, but also we need ideas of how do we then begin to look into that and fix that. Finally, there's a challenge around whether or not we're able to support our exporters. And these are going to be the hardest hit in the economy. So as a DTIC, we're mindful that the export market and our exporters needs particular support. The markets that are used to exporting to, most of them are closing, whether it's Europe, it's North America, we're mindful of that. So now what do we do? The WTO says almost 32% contraction is going to happen insofar as exports. So what we are doing as a DTI now is we're looking at a facility where we can offer some concessional finance to some exporters. We have not launched it yet, but I'm putting it out there because we are mindful of some pockets of the spectrum that have not been catered to, so that we can assist with that, and also to look into collaboration with our partners on the rest of the African continent and facilitate greater access for South African entrepreneurs and vice versa, and deal with blockages at the different borders, Lebombo, Bridge, and the like. I'm super rushing through this, but I'm hopeful that this at least gives a perspective of what we are doing as government on a daily basis to try and do that that I spoke of earlier, balance saving lives and also maintaining as far as possible and saving livelihoods.
Oh, for sure. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Loretta. Thanks so much for all that information, that address. I mean, it is true that South Africa is, being spoken about quite well in the rest of the world in terms of the speedy effort that we have made to try and balance the curve. But of course, we came, or flatten the curve, we came into COVID-19 in a very precarious situation economically. I believe we were even forecast to contract or go into recession, or have been in a recession according to some economists, even before COVID-19, and COVID-19 has just made things a lot worse. Lerato, in as much as the government has done a lot, and it's done a lot, the question really is around, how all the efforts the government has made is being felt on the ground to the businesses that it has sought to help. And we're going to get a bit of insights from some ladies who are in business here in South Africa, who are contributing to the fiscus and trying to play their part in growing the economy, really about the relief measures from government, but also just a personal experience from them around how COVID-19 has impacted on their businesses. And at this stage, I'd like to introduce two ladies, Ms. Pepsi Bayoko, who is the co-founder and the CEO of Neon Energy, and also Maki Sillo, who is the director of Budding Cons Services. And ladies, thanks so much for your time and joining us this evening. Let's kick off really with a brief introduction about your businesses, exactly what you do, and how business has changed since COVID-19 landed here in South Africa. Pepsi, to begin with you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Fifi, to give me a spot. Currently, my business, Neon Energy, is all about solar panels or solar energy. So what I do is I import the thermal collectors, I assemble them here, and then I make a photovoltaic panel. And then that panel produces both thermal energy and electrical energy in one. So definitely, because we are focusing in supply and installations, COVID-19 has hit us hard. And one of the reasons maybe is because, one of the main thing was we started expanding. And when we expanded, first country where it needed our panel, our kind of panel, was Middle East. And when we got to Middle East, unfortunately, Middle East, already by end of January, we could not make business with them because already then they were hit by COVID. So all our installations of February were put aside. And when we were still trying to think, okay, now that Middle East, because you plan ahead because you've got projects and you've got small number of engineers. What you do is, okay, now that we cannot work anymore in the Middle East, let's focus in South Africa. Just when we had few projects to start with, then it in end of Feb, March, then we were hit already also in South Africa. And that made us, not to recover because there was never a cent in our bank account from February till to date. So definitely it has hit us hard, whereby my staff have felt it because they had to endure cuts from their payment. So yeah.
No, definitely. These cuts have all hit us hard. And Pepsi, thanks so much for being honest about your business and the situation that it is currently in right now. Maki, I mean, many people are calling 2020 a write-off personally, but even for businesses, because we have seen plans changed overnight as a result of COVID-19, and how what was realistically possible before is no longer feasible. Talk to us about what COVID-19 has done to your business, as you do tell us exactly what your business does.
Hi, good evening, ladies. I want to pick up from one sentence that was said by Lerato earlier, that government has done a lot. Currently, where I'm sitting, I feel like government has said a lot. And I think you can understand some of the challenges that we're facing. Maybe let me start giving a little bit of background of where I am right now. My company is in engineering and services. We can do anything steel related. And when I started this company, just to raise funds, I started with services because professionally I come from HR. And I realized the opportunity for manufacturing. Actually, with me, a business idea can come very easy. I realized an opportunity in steel manufacturing, and I managed to put together a team of engineers that were willing to work with me. And this process actually started last year around September. And by January this year, we're starting to see where we're going in terms of opportunities that we've identified in Zimbabwe and in Botswana. Actually, we had one or few trips to go into those countries. And at the same time, locally, it was very small projects that we're doing. And if I can just give, for example, what you will do, it's the normal fencing and you know your normal butlers. But basically, the capacity that we have can manufacture from your smallest product in terms of domestic to your biggest product in terms of the mining sector, where we can actually fabricate the whole, what do you call, the gearboxes in mine, the cabin houses for the mines. We can do the whole conveyor belts. Now, with the COVID-19, we actually felt like we were at the right place when it actually started happening, because we could manufacture hospital beds. We are, although we don't have our own ISO certificate, but we have some system in place that actually fit with ISO standards in terms of hospital beds as they are published by the Department of Trade and Industry. Then immediately thereafter, I started putting my eyes all over. And to a certain extent, I came across the International Fabricator, Steel Fabricators Organization, which they're based in Benoni. And they actually marketed us to government, and in particular, the Department of Trade and Industry. So immediately before the end of March, we were all over the place with the Department of Industry in terms of them kind of previewing our products and our systems and our documents. And I think we went around 3 submissions that we submitted to the Department of Trade and Industry for the hospital beds. And by the last stage, which is the 3rd stage, we were in the process of registering with their external procurement database, which was a hassle. The system will kick you out, you come back into the system. But at the end of the day, we've succeeded. And they were happy with what you've given them. To an extent that we even have discussion, because we're saying we can manufacture about 30 beds in 2 weeks. We have a capacity, our workshop capacity, we have about 2,000 square meters under roof production. So we have enough space. And they even asked a few questions to say, if we were to increase our capacity in terms of hospital beds, can we do that? And we said yes. So we did everything up until the end. And by the end of all this thing, we got a communication from the Department of Trade and Industry, the team that was talking to us, to say, actually the whole procurement has been moved from national, is now done by provinces. And we started working with the provinces. I managed to register on the Department of Health database for hospital beds. And to our disappointment, up until today, we haven't been called by anyone.
All right.
What was
okay? This is quite interesting. And Maki, sorry to cut you in there. We've got a limited time frame, but I think I'm getting the essence of your story. A lot of talk and not enough action in terms of what has come out from government so far. Before we hear Larato's side of the story, because I can imagine it's been quite chaotic, the navigating through the government corridors while still trying to help as many businesses as possible. Pepsi, what's your response to some of the relief measures that you and I spoke last night about your engagement on some of the relief you had applied for some relief, and where does your application currently stand now?
Oh, that's been a hassle. I must say that, you know, I'm one of those people who always on top of the game, especially where my staff is concerned. So by already 30th of March, just after the president has announced the reliefs. So what I did was the 29th and 30th of March, I was just working on applications all of them, name them CFAs, the UIFs, but unfortunately till to date, I have not received anything. And I wonder what criteria are they using, because I've been running my company successfully for the past 6 years, ever since I'm back home, South Africa. And I've been complying, paying, taxes, UIFs, all those compliance that are needed by each and every company. But still to date, we have not received anything. To the point that this month, I had to make sure that, I've got, unfortunately, they're small businesses. We also become emotional at times, and which is not, it's not good, because, now I had to go dig into my pocket, my family's funds, and see if I can, just give these guys something to put the bread on the table, because those are the people that I've been with for a while. And those are the people that when I travel overseas, when I'm not in here, I'm out of the province to another province, they look after my business. So I just thought of them and say, what can I do with the little that we've got? I had to share with them.
Sure.
And it's sad because, like I say, I don't know what criteria the government is using to which companies come first. Because at the moment, I must say, I'm one of the members of BWSA. I'm one of the members in Gracia Machel Women Creating Wealth program. I haven't had anybody who mentioned to the stage that she has been successful in getting a relief. So I'm wondering who is exactly getting this relief.
Well, hopefully we've got one or two ladies who have had a positive experience, or who have been able to access some form of relief from government tuned into this webinar, and hopefully we will be hearing from them soon, as we do soon open up for a Q&A. Of course, if you don't get your question through in time, you can of course engage other platforms. The social media hashtag to use is Businesswoman Persevere. Lerato, coming back to you, and I imagine that you imagine that this evening would be difficult, in the sense that you'd have a lot more people saying that getting help from government was a lot harder than people giving government praise right now. Help us understand from government's perspective and what has been going on in the corridors of government since the COVID-19 landed on our shores. I mean, how you guys have had to move swiftly in making really quick decisions, in ensuring, however, that business gets the help that you're talking about. In fact, Maki has said that you've spoken a lot about the help, but they've yet to see it. What's the issue? Why are applications not being responded to? Why are people's queries not being responded to? What's going on?
Thank you, Fifi. I think people would be aware. I'll just use the example of the Oppenheimer Fund. I think within a week there was an oversubscription to that fund. So I'm making that point to say the majority of the non-response is not about whether or not the company qualifies. There's a lot of applications that have come in, whether it's UIF, whether it's the Small Business Department Fund, whether it's the IDC. So it's a function of the system being overwhelmed. I don't think anybody sitting in December last year in any of these institutions would have anticipated that there would be this level of demand administratively, even to support and to make sure that we assist our businesses. So it's a big challenge. Be mindful of it. So I'm not going to stand here and say that it's easy for a business that has applied and they're waiting for a response. But what I do know as well is that the system is overwhelmed. So we have to find a way of assisting each other, and it's one of the things that we are talking about as well in the different structures that we have within government to try and deal with this. So we'd also like to appeal for patience. I understand that when you have to pay people, there's no time for patience. However, for as long as you don't have a categorical no, please know that there's a queue around that. And the second issue as well that it is important for me to raise is a point that was made. I think it was actually both Pepsi and Mikey in different ways. The issue of access to markets and access to procurement opportunities. So in response to this, we also had to course correct along the way. And I think a lot of businesses were also mindful and aware that at some point, you had to get into different supply databases, provincial level, and then eventually became the National Treasury one and the like. We also needed to give ourselves an opportunity to do the right thing, right? And to centralize where necessary. So right now, insofar as domestic supply opportunities, the National Treasury takes the lead. So we encourage our companies to be registered with the National Treasury database. We are also working through Business South Africa as well as Black Business Council around making recommendations for some of the companies to be part of that database specifically. So it's important that I raise that too. As a DTIC, we are busy with the project now with Proudly South Africa to expand their platform called RSA Made. Because we're also mindful that going forward, it will no longer be as easy to go and do our export promotion and the like in the old traditional way, where we take you to China, you go to a trade fair or a pavilion. So it's about creating a digital platform for our entrepreneurs to showcase their products. So we're busy with that. So it's important that, our stakeholders and private sectors are aware that we are working on a platform such as this, because we would want then our companies to be a part of it and begin to benefit from exposure abroad in a different form. Finally, at the continental level as well. And here I would appeal for businesses to actually engage with the DTIC on this. We are again working on a supplier database at continental level through the African Union. South Africa is the chair of the AU. Our president has given, with of course the president's colleagues, the instruction for us to then begin to put together an African supply database so that we can supply one another on the continent. So it's critical that it is not just being in the South African supplier database, it's also elevating it to the broader continental and eventually global level. And that's what we are busy with as well. And I'm more than happy for my details to be shared, so that these company details can be then plugged into the right places and the right databases.
Okay. So you've got quite a number of things on the go there. And the message that I got is, in terms of your application not being responded to, no news is not necessarily a bad news. But the problem is a lot of companies, however, Lerato, don't have the comfort and the room to be patient right now. We've just heard from Pepsi saying that she's had to dig into her own pockets in order to provide some form of income for her workers, not the entire salary, some form of income for her workers to buy basic things like food. Maki as well is talking about how revenue has essentially dried up and it's at a standstill as a result of not hearing from government as fast enough. I mean, I do agree with you in terms of what we have seen in the private sector with the Rupert and the Oppenheimer Fund, those funds also being exhausted quite quickly. And Pepsi and Maki, which leads me to my next question to you guys around, given that government itself is also quite overwhelmed with cries for help from all corners, how has your engagements with the private sector been? Lerato did mention the opening up of the 200 billion rand loan guarantee scheme. Have you tried perhaps to get assistance there, Maki? Hi, is Maki still with us?
Yeah, I was still on mute. Sorry, I'm back.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
The 200 billion rand loan guarantee scheme, what has been your experience of trying to solicit some form of help from the private sector?
To a certain extent, I did not want to approach the private sector. Actually, I was just thinking of it today because I realized that government guarantee loan scheme was coming out. Because all the time, the experience that I had with government in terms of these hospital beds was so positive. I don't even understand how no one followed through after I had calls that were coming to our office. I had emails on a daily basis, we had communication. So I was of the view that something will come up, because out of that, they even refer us to IDC, where we developed a business plan, we developed a funding model to say, in case we get a purchase order from one of these government departments, then IDC will come in and fit in. So at that time, I was very much comfortable. To tell you the honest fact, up until the end of April, I was confident that something's coming out. But what we have since done is that we have developed a new product, which is the sanitizer dispenser. I'm selling it in the private sector. I cannot even get an opportunity to provide to government in terms of the stainless steel dispenser. So to a certain extent, I gave up. It was like a serious blow on our side. And I wasn't even looking for funding beyond this. So for me now, I'm focusing on rebranding myself in terms of the new products that I can bring in, like for example, I've just given, but at the same time is to say, how do I prepare myself in the next 2 months to be able to come out of the situation where I am and to survive beyond, the 2 months of the lockdown.
Pepsi, your thoughts here. I mean, private sector funding we know is not the cheapest. Government in this loan guarantee scheme that it is working with the major banks has tried to make it as affordable as possible. Have you tried to engage the private sector on money just to get you through this difficult time? And what has been your experience so far?
Yes, I did, of course, but in Neon Energy, it's not 100% South African or Black South African business. My shareholders are also white and they are foreigners. So I did not meet the criteria. However, saying that is that the other thing was, besides, like Lerato has mentioned, the system was overwhelmed. It was already, there were lots of people getting one, focusing on getting one funding. So it was exhausted before it even reached everybody else. But one of the main reasons for me, I guess, because I've got two, I don't know, I won't mention them, but privately I would be able to share that the priorities were the 100% South African based companies, and mine is not, unfortunately. However, as an entrepreneur, my skill as well, my background is into manufacturing. So what I did was, in the midst of everything else, as an entrepreneur, one learned to wrangle the thoughts. So eventually I've started another manufacturing company whereby I've already raised some funds. I'm still lacking, but I've got enough now to put the deposit to the machinery of surgical masks only. And it's simply because it's what I know best. And when I did my research, realizing that in South Africa as a whole, at the current stage, we do not have any surgical mask manufacturer. And then I thought, that's where my skill is needed. So that's what I'm focusing on as well. However, I'm not neglecting my energy. I'm an entrepreneur. I take calculated risk. I'm persistent. I take decisive and action oriented. So that's what I'm doing now.
That's so fantastic, because the both of you are talking about your or the way in which you have adapted to this current environment. You have changed very quickly. You have sought new opportunities, and that is essentially what entrepreneurship is about. And it's great to see that spirit quite strong amongst us women. Lerato, we are getting some questions coming through from the chat box from a number of virtual attendees who have joined us this evening. And given that just yesterday we were celebrating Africa Day, I think I'll begin with that one. You made some comments around the continental supplier base. A bit more details around that, given the free trade area deal was supposed to start the 1st of July. We're hearing announcements that this is going to be postponed as a result of the COVID-19 lockdowns across the continent. Just give us a bit more detail regarding that continental supplier base and how it affects and how it possibly could benefit those wanting to participate in the AFCFTA.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, and happy Africa Day to everybody a day later. So fundamentally, the initiative to have an African essential, or at least COVID supplier database, was to avoid what seems to be a race to the bottom, right? Where everybody is trying to, as far as possible, keep essential provisions for themselves, hoard what they can from the global market, and the like. And it's an understanding that as a continent, we need to collaborate. We need to make sure that we cross-share where we've got essential supplies, be it masks, be it exactly hospital beds, ventilators, and the like. So this supplier database is going through the whole gamut of essential supplies in response to COVID-19. Part of the conversation that we have had as well is that how do we expand the database further going forward to look at agribusiness products? People have to eat, even in a crisis. So we're going as far as that. So it's quite important that all of our suppliers in South Africa, whether it's masks, it's sanitizers, hospital beds, all the way to the high-tech textiles and ventilators themselves and software, are on the database. And it's our responsibility then as the DTIC to make sure that we consolidate that database for supply to the African Union, who are the custodians of this. So the same database will then also be used, of course, for domestic demand, so that it's known who's supplying what insofar as domestic demand. But priority is to make sure that the continent is not left without supplies, because everybody's fighting to hoard the few resources that may be around. So that's a part of it. So it's about maintaining intra-Africa trade even in the midst of a crisis, even as we shift some of the deadlines of the CFTA, but we still have to trade amongst ourselves. We still have to make sure we supply medical equipment and food to one another as a continent.
Certainly, and just staying in the agriculture space, which you did highlight on, there is also a question, Rato, around sugar and why it was the first to be prioritized from a processing point of view.
Sure. On some level, it was fortuitous, I suppose, because the department is engaged in a process of master plan, different sectoral master plans. One of the first 4 that we did was sugar, of course, poultry, clothing and textiles, and the automotive master plan. There are a few others that are coming down the line. So when the crisis hit, being mindful that sugar literally constitutes 70, if not 80% of the agro-processed value chain. I think even a roll of polony has some sugar in it in some level. So that's how critical sugar is from a food security standpoint. So it was important that we maintain the agricultural value chains and the food value chains, right? And to make sure that that we then begin to show up and continue to show up the sugar industry. And I think most would remember that even before the crisis, the sugar industry was under some pressures. There were global sugar issues and issues of sugar tax and the like. So the industry itself has been a little bit vulnerable, even pre the crisis. So it was important that if we're going to maintain the agriculture and agro-process value chains, that sugar is catered to and supported.
All right. And then, just bringing the focus back to women and women businesses, which is the purpose of this evening, is there any numbers, or are you able to tell us, just how many women businesses have been supported from government relief funds so far, and, exactly how government has ensured that women-owned businesses are not left behind here?
The whole issue of women-owned businesses is critical. I mean, the government has been very clear that Black-owned, women-owned, youth-owned businesses are quite important. And in the midst of a crisis, I don't think as yet we have been able to give you, say our approval numbers for the last month would have been how many women in the lab. I think the most important thing was, how do we survive? How do we maintain survival of small businesses? But I must also say that this also presents an opportunity for women-owned businesses to be a bit more vocal I think I'd like to request that there's greater advocacy around women-owned businesses. We hear more voices around Black business, right? As a collective. And organizations like the Black Women's Association are quite critical, but we need to also help show up and make the voices a bit louder. There's room for greater women business advocacy in the country, and I'm sympathetic that perhaps majority of women issues in business get subsumed by Black business issues, if you know what I mean. So we tend to also lose the nuance of the impact on specifically women, feminization of labor and all those issues that pertain to their part of things. So I think this crisis, let's not waste it. One of the things that the points I wanted to make is that as women, let's not waste this crisis. Let them be clearer and a bit more articulate about what it is that we need as a subsection of society, not as a blanket, under the Black part of things and as women. We've got critical specific issues, but be it in business and government. So I think this is an opportunity for us to be heard a little bit more. And us in government, it's our responsibility to then make those issues that are raised by women entrepreneurs, elevate them into the right platforms, even at home and on the continent.
Okay, Lerato, more questions coming in regarding assistance for women, specifically that NEF fund, the 1 billion rand NEF fund that you did mention. I mean, give us a little bit more details and it's exactly how us as a woman can get some form of assistance from that fund.
The NEF, there should be the guidelines for each of the funds, IDC, NEF, even the small business department. The presidency website, government website, and the DTIC website, I'll just verify for you, we should have that. We've consolidated all the different support measures that government has, irrespective of the department they reside in or the entity or institution they reside in. And each of them then have specific guidelines around what qualifying criteria pertains to the specific fund. So it'd be difficult for me to then specifically then break down what the NEF one says vis-a-vis, because some are also looking specifically at small businesses, and there's a threshold that they utilize in terms of annual turnover and a few other variables that they use. But I do know that the presidency website, that the southafrica.gov website also has the consolidated incentives. I have them myself, so I'm happy to email to anyone insofar as the organization who can then share with everybody. So we do have that information, including UIF, what Treasury has, what Reserve Bank has, and all of that. So I'd be happy to share that.
Right, and I must let you know that people are quite happy with you and your work. People are saying in the chat box that they find you quite helpful, specifically in helping them to navigate the government's various relief programs. So we're left with around 3 minutes, and I'd like to just get to some closing remarks. And I do apologize for not getting to all the questions and the comments that were coming through the chat. Of course, you can contact BWSA, and I do believe that this is one of many conversations that we are going to be having, specifically as COVID-19 is not something that's going away any time soon, and especially in the absence of a treatment or a cure. And let me just begin with the ladies who have joined us. Maki, just to begin with you regarding some closing remarks very briefly. We've got 3 minutes to share amongst each other, and maybe just to end on a little bit more of a positive note, expanding further on how you have shifted focus and tried to focus on some of the opportunities that COVID-19 has brought.
Maybe let me start thanking you, Fifi, for actually, facilitating this and sharing this discussion. And also big thanks to Lerato for the information that you have shared with us. And actually, it's even encouraging, personally, to talk to a government officials, after hours, during this difficult, you manage to avail yourself. I think from where I'm sitting is that some of us, we are in business not because we want to look for millions. We're in business because we fit well there. And we understand the opportunities that are there in the market. and we can sell this opportunity quite well. There is a market for our product. The only challenge is that we just need, a very focused relationship between women in business and government. And to make this impact felt, you can imagine that I don't want to be too particular with women, but I've seen organizations that are managed and run by women. They're totally different. They're very caring. In us, there is a unique way of, starting businesses, growing them, and maintaining them. And for that, I just want to say, thanks to all the ladies that are trying to do this. And let's keep our head above and fight more, because we can win this battle. It's just a matter of time. We can win this battle. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Maki. Pepsi?
Yes, thank you once again. Thanks, Fifi. And Lerato, before you leave, thank you so much for the input. I've learned so much, and I will keep in touch. Mike, you have just set the bar high in that closure. I've seen a question as well about inspiration right there. And I want to say in closure, difficult times, they also bring opportunities. And I also say, when extreme circumstances can only be resolved equally by extreme actions. So at the moment, do not lose hope. There is a skill inside you. You may not have seen it, have identified it, but it is time to realign yourself. The career defining movements are now. And also it's time to better calculate risks and manage those curveballs. Believe it or not, it's not easy. We have, as entrepreneurs, have sleepless nights. You have, as much as we work remotely, it looks like leisure because we are home, but it is not. It's actually harder than when we were in the office. So look around you, look at what the world requires. You'll find what you can do. But this is just, unfortunately, COVID-19 is just the beginning of many other viruses. So do not lose hope. Know that there's tomorrow. Just work hard and go out there, speak, ask for advices. We are here to share our opinions and advices at any time. And I thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Pepsi. Definitely. I mean, they say that while we're navigating COVID-19, we need to be mindful that the next crisis is just around the corner. So yeah, crisis management needs to be integrated quite deeply in business strategy. Lerato, very quick final words from you before we do let you go.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much, Fifi. I think you've done an excellent job in navigating this conversation. And I like what you say when you say crisis management has to be integral in any business. And in my view, there are no better people to manage crises than women. And I'm of the view that, again, we should not waste this crisis. This crisis is giving us an opportunity for the real female leadership to occur. The strong, soft, compassionate, nurturing, powerful form of leadership. People are talking about the resetting of resetting the economic system, political system button and all of that. I think this is giving us the moment to reset the leadership button. And have a female-centric, female-centered type of leadership, whether in business and government, and I'm talking about the characteristics of female leadership, not necessarily the form and the gender. The form will always be good, but that's what I mean. It's about time that we rethink and relook the manner in which we approach and we manage and we structure the world. And this is an opportunity for that. I think COVID has given us that. And it's for us to push for it. And more than anything, I'd like at least 3 months from now for South African female business voice to be stronger. Come and break down these government doors and push for what you want as women. I sit in government as a woman, and it shocks me how much the female voice is so small. So I mean, at least let me take the opportunity, since this is a women's platform, to put that forward and say, we need to hear you a little bit more. You need to empower me, so when I sit in boardrooms, whether on the continent or in BRICS, I can talk on your issues. So that for me is critical. If we can do that, then,
all right.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Lerato. Well, when we do get to, the government doors, we will say that, no, one of your own has given us the invitation to come and break down the doors and have our voices heard. So please do let the soldiers and the security there do know that we are on our way. Ladies, thanks so much once again for your time, and thank you to everyone at home who has tuned in. I do apologize for not getting to all your questions. Of course, this is the first of many engagements to come. And what you can actually do is please email some of the questions that weren't answered to gauteng@bwasa.co.za, and that is gauteng@bwasa.co.za, and we'll certainly ensure that those questions are prioritized next time we meet. Thank you once again for joining us, and I really do look forward to hearing more testimonies of survival from the women-owned businesses in our economy. From myself, thanks so much. It is goodbye for now, and for the team at BWSA, thanks so much for putting this together. And it's a wrap. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night and bye. Thank you very much. Bye.